Director of LPEM FEB UI, Professor Yu Chung-sik of the Graduate School of Environmental Finance of Yonsei University, Professor Song-Hoon Kim of the Graduate School of Environmental Finance of Yonsei University, Professor Suk-hyun of the Graduate School of Environmental Finance of Yonsei University, Professor Toshiro Nishizawa of the Graduate School of Public Policy, University of Tokyo, Dr. Kiki Feriko, Senior Researcher of LPM FEB UI, Dr. Jahan Reski, Associate Director for Finance of LPM FEB UI, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to extend my greetings to distinguished speakers, discussants, and chair, and all participants of today's seminar. Good morning. Welcome to the joint seminar between Yonsei University and LPM FEB UI on green finance, a lesson learned from the Republic of Korea. My name is Faradina, your master of ceremony for today's seminar. Our deepest gratitude shall be attributed to the Institute for Economic and Social Research in collaboration with Yonsei University for hosting this event. This seminar marks the first joint collaboration between Yonsei University and the Institute for Economic and Social Research. Going forward, it is our hope that cooperation within the framework of research, academic activities, and relevant government functions will happen between the two parties. To formally open this seminar, I would like to invite Dr. Chaikal Nuryakin, Director of the Institute for Economic and Social Research, to deliver his welcoming remarks. Pak Chaikal, you have around 5 minutes to deliver your speech. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Faradina. Excellency, Professor Yu Chung-sik. I'm sorry, Prof, if I mispronounce your name. Professor Sung-Hoon Kim, Professor Suk-hyun from the Graduate School of Environmental Finance, Yonsei University. My colleague and friend, Professor Toshiro Nishizawa, University of Tokyo, and my lovely supervisor, guardian, Ibu Riatu, and my big brother, this is Dr. Kiki Feriko, the most handsome guy in this building, and smart too, yeah. And my proud little brother, Dr. Jahan Reski, that I'm very, very fortunate to have you on my side. Distinguished guests, honorable colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Chunachimiyo, ohai gozaimasu, selamat pagi. My name is Chaikal Nuryakin. I'm the newly appointed director of LPEM and Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia. I think I obliged to you to introduce all the members of the BOD. This is Pak Jahan, my Deputy Director for Research. And we have Pak Muhammad Revindo, Deputy for Education and Trainings. And last but not least, we have Ibu Hera Susanti, Deputy for Administration and Finance. It is a great honor to welcome you to our office, to the joint seminar between Yonsei University and LPM on green finance, a lesson learned from the Republic of Korea. I think this is no coincidence, Prof. Our honorable guest, Yonsei University and Tokyo University is the first academic institution that visit us this year. So I would like to convey my appreciation and thank you for your dedication beyond willingness to have collaboration with us. And also to the former BOD, especially Bu Riatu and Pak Kiki, that have put already so much effort to make this collaboration and event come true. Our event today and our collaboration is very much actually in line with the mandates that we have from our Dean, Bapak Teguh Dartanto, in which that he requests us that LPEM should produce more knowledge, that LPM should be more visible in the national and international communities, and that LPM should be more impactful. LPM should have a more impactful research and training to help government, policymakers, and private sectors in creating most prosperous, just, and well-being societies. So that is why I personally hope that our discussion today will help us think in the green finance framework. It is to enrich our perspective on the technical knowledge and database analysis on the climate change and environment, and to learn what has been going on in the Republic of Korea, right? So this should trigger us a discussion on how it could have Indonesia to adopt its green financing strategy. So I wish to thank the speakers, Professor Sung Hoon Kim, Professor Suk Hyun, and the discussion, Bapak Kiki Feriko and Pak Jahan, and also Prof. Yu Chung Sik, and also Professor Toshiro Nishizawa, who will chair the discussion session. To conclude, I would like to thank the committee for the successful event and all the participants who are coming today. So I wish you a fruitful discussion, and hopefully we can generate working recommendations for the design that Indonesia needs to adopt in its green financing strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Chaikal. Now I'd like to invite Professor Chung Sik Yu from the Graduate School of Environmental Finance, Yonsei University, to deliver his opening remarks. Prof. Yu, you have about 5 minutes to deliver your speech. The floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to be here to address the opening remarks for the meaningful conference today. Thank you for your kind invitation. I'm Yonsei Yu, Finance at Yonsei University. As you are well aware, climate change is a real threat to human beings' long-term survival. It is not reversible, and we don't have effective vaccine to prevent it. Only way we can do is to redirect resources to low carbon and energy efficient activities. This requires comprehensive policy package like adequate carbon reduction programs, timely disclosure of climate risks, and adoption of preventive measures, alleviating potential sufferings of vulnerable populations, and most importantly, green investment to mobilize resources needed for actual implementation. While significant efforts for climate financing are evolving, it still is far less than what is needed. We need to find incentive-compatible ways to attract more climate funding, especially for emerging and developing economies like South Korea and Indonesia. I find today's conference is a very small but significantly important step forward for mutually beneficial cooperation between two institutions. Special thanks should be given to professors who put time and effort for this conference feasible. Once again, thank you for your hospitality and care. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Yu. Let us now proceed to the main agenda of today's seminar, which is the presentations and discussion session. There will be two presenters in this session, Professor Sung Hoon Kim from the Graduate School of Environmental Finance, Yonsei University, and Professor Suk Hyun, also from the Graduate School of Environmental Finance, Yonsei University. First, I would like to invite Professor Sung Hoon Kim from Graduate School of Environmental Finance, Yonsei University, to present his paper on climate change and macroeconomic performance in Korea. You have around 25 minutes to talk about your findings. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you for having me here. I'm very pleased to share my research with the audience and then you here. And before we just start, do you have a pointer so that well, I should have been first asked, but okay, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, I think I can do. Yeah. Well, so today, so shall I start? Yeah. Okay. So today I'm going to talk about the economic impact of climate change for the case of the Korean economy. Actually, this work is drawn from a large research project in which we studied not only Korea, we studied the economic impact of climate change for the ASEAN +3 region, but we did very selectively. We haven't studied about Indonesia. We have studied Korea and other Thailand and the Philippines. But anyway, I drew some part of the results by focusing on Korea. Okay. Next slide. Okay. Well, there are two possible approaches to in studying the economic impact of climate change. One is you can start from each sector and industry level, and then estimate the damage of climate change and estimate the cost of mitigation and the adaptation. Okay, and the other approach is the next slide. Yeah, you can look at the aggregate level. Okay, so you measure or estimate the impact of climate change by focusing on the aggregate macroeconomic variables, such as GDP and the total factor productivity and the industrial production growth, unemployment, and inflation. Each approach, of course, has pros and cons. Next slide, please. Yeah. And the utmost upside of the second approach, focusing on the aggregate variables, is that that approach can help us to understand some key mechanism in which climate change, how the climate change affect the economy as a whole. So, for example, if the climate change has some kind of the adverse supply side shock, then when an economy is hit by the climate, the extreme weather events or the climate change, it initiate the inflation hike, which in turn depreciates that country's currency value, and in turn it raised the import price, and it eventually again feed back the acceleration of inflation hikes as well. So in this talk today, I'll focus on the second approach, okay? Because most of the studies focused on for this reason, ASEAN +3 region, is usually focused on the first approaches, which start from the sector and industry level. But anyway, so my approach is today is the second one, which is assessing the impact of climate change from the macro and systemic ways. Okay, so let me shortly list key 3 questions in this talk. Okay, the first one is that how does climate change matter or affect economy at the aggregate level, and how large and how persistent? Then which particular weather events have more impact, okay, than other the possible weather events. Okay, so having in these questions in mind, okay, we bring the 2 sets of data, climate and the economy. Okay, and let me briefly tell you how we construct the climate data. Okay, so we construct climate data based on these 3 ideas. You can think of the weather events as kind of the random variable or random draws from a probability distribution. This probability distribution we call the climate. Okay, so we can model the climate change as kind of the shift of the moment of the probability distribution or the observed extreme weather events. So we collect daily extreme events such as temperatures and rainfalls and wind speed and so on. And then we can count the monthly frequency of extreme daily events. Okay? And then we constructed a kind of the probability distribution. And then we normalize that distribution to capture the climate change, normalized in reference period, which is suggested by the international community of climate study. Is the reference period is the 1961 to 1990. So by doing so, we capture the climate change by observing the extreme daily weather events. Okay. So by doing so, we construct the climate index and have a look at the bottom 6 panels here. And panels is the hot temperatures, and this is the extreme hot temperature, above 19th percentile of the temperature, and this is the cold wave kind of thing. So this is the very extremely cold days, and the drought and the precipitation is these two variables are drawn from the observed rainfall and the snowfall. Okay. And then this is the wind speed, and this one is the sea level. Sea level data is only available since the 1993. Okay. Then you can make, by aggregating this each extreme weather events to construct the single climate index. So the first one, AECI, stands for the Asian Extreme Weather Climate Index. We just named it, okay? And the 4P means that this is kind of the average of the 4. So the first 4, so hot, cold, and drought and precipitation. And the AECI 5, okay, indicates that the kind of the average of the hot, cold, drought, and precipitation and wind. And 6 means that, as the sea level, okay, change like that. Then, well, the second set of the data is the economic one, okay? So all these data, well, what I have in mind is that when we collect the data, we focused on the market and financial markets. Okay, so the first 3 panels, outgrowth and the CPI and PPI inflation, represent the quantity and price of the goods market, and the unemployment change represent the change in the labor market condition, and the bottom 4. The figures represent the financial market. So this is the short-term bond market, and the last one is the equity market, and between these two is represented the currency market. Okay, and so this is this quantity side of the foreign exchange market, and this is the price side, and we put that all this data, and then we search, and then we found that the FX reserve or quantity side doesn't affect, and isn't significant. So we use that the price data exchange rate like that. Then we use the model reduced from a variable bar. Okay, so AECI means the climate index. Then this Y is a collection of some kind of the climate shock and the goods market, labor market, and financial market. Okay. And the leg of this model is that the 3 to 6. And then today I just presented that the result from the leg 6. Okay. And we also control the constant trend and monthly dummy to control the seasonality as well. And in order to identify the climate shock or the extreme weather shock, okay, we use the standard recursive method based on the scholastic composition. And as kind of a robustness check, we also repeat the test using the sign restriction method. The idea behind of this method is that if you are really concerned about the climate change, that means that the climate change is kind of the adverse shock. Is this adverse shock is a demand side or a supply side? At the moment, we can think of that this is the supply side. So if the climate shock or extreme weather events are kind of the adverse supply side shock, And then if you remind yourself of what you learned from your undergraduate study, and just think about that, the AS and AD curve, okay? And then if the adverse shock hit the economy, that it induces rise in the price or inflation and drops in the output. Okay, so we impose this kind of imposing this one, we identify the climate shock in this VAR model, vector auto-regulation model. So here are the results, okay, and the key results of this study. And can I just presume that you are quite familiar with this kind of this presentation? So yeah, just to mention, and the horizontal axis is the month. Okay, so month 0 is the time of the impact, okay, of climate change. Then you follow how these variables respond over the next 60 months. Okay? And you can think of that this vertical axis as kind of the percent point. Okay, so this means that when one standard deviation shock, okay, hit the economy, so climate shock hit the economy from the distribution. Once we put that the one standard deviation of the whole distribution of the climate change, okay, then you found that for example, the output growth, okay, is slightly up a little, first of all, two months, but it quickly fold up to the 0.5% point, okay, along the median level. So the whole gray area is the confidence interval, and then at the 90% level, and the solid this curve is that the median estimate. Okay, so let me focus on the median estimate. So as you see, is that when Korean economy hit by the one standard deviation of climate shock, okay, then we experience that the slowdown, the output growth, and the hike of CPI and PPI inflation, and rise in unemployment, and tightening of short-term borrowing market, and the depreciation of Korean won. So when the exchange rate is rise, this means that the depreciation of Korean won against the USD. Okay, and as you see it, lastly, the equity market also negatively respond to the climate change shock, as you see here, and the size is quite large, up to the 2%, more than 2% point. Okay, right. And if you look at the timing of that, the goods market price is respond quicker than the financial market, which is quite interesting point. Oops. Oh. Right. Then we did robustness check using the sign restriction method, and then we impose, okay, if the climate shock, okay, can be modeled as kind of the adverse supply side shock, we can impose the fall in output growth and rise in inflation for the first 6 months. Okay, and then we simulate, and then we collect that all the responses which satisfies these conditions. Okay, then as you see, well, the whole result are quite qualitatively same as before. Okay, although we use a different identification method. Okay, and the other point is that the magnitude of responsiveness of its macro variable is much greater, almost a double up. So as you see, the output growth here just fall at the maximum 0.5%, but here it turns out that they're up to -1% point like that. And if you also look at the equity market, the stock returns fall under the sign restriction method. It turns out that the up to almost 4% here, 4% point, more than 3.5% like that. But here it only falls that the up to 3% point like that. So under either identification strategies, either of the identification strategies, we found that the old results are qualitatively the same and economically sensible. Okay. So Then we move on to each of the weather index. So heat stress, cold wave, and the drought and precipitation and wind speed and the sea level. Okay, in order to find which particular weather events are more important in leading to these kind of the results. Okay, so we repeat our analysis using a single weather event. Then what we found is under the heat stress shock, okay, the Korean economy responded almost the same like that. Okay, although there is the oscillatory behavior appeared, like this one. So we may think that the heat stress shock they contribute to the many potential results of the climate shock. So heat is a really important thing. And then we do the same analysis using the cold wave. And then we found that other variables are quite sensibly respond as we've seen before, but the outgrowth is little respond and confidence in some really large, so this is statistically insignificant. So perhaps the Korean economy responded to the heat wave more than to the cold stress or cold wave, like that. And then we move on to the other precipitation and drought. And some variables behave under the shock of drought and precipitation as if it hit by the temperature or cold stress, but some other variables, differently respond. Okay. So another point also is that if you look at the precipitation and the drought, okay, the confidence band is really large, so it is statistically less significant than temperature. Okay, and also we they look at the wind speed and sea level, but as you can see, the Korean economy isn't affected much by the rising sea level, fortunately. So collecting all the results. Oh, sorry, this is the slip from another analysis. So just forget about it. And let me wrapping up these results. Okay, and our first question is that how does the climate change matter for the economy aggregate level? Okay, and we find yes, the Korean economy is affected by the climate change. Okay, and how large and how persistent? And first, how large? Well, the currency value of Korean won depreciated by the 1 to 3% point. Okay, and the stock returns up to by 3 or 4% point, which is quite incredible. And if you look at the labor market and the goods market side, you see that the outgrowth is slightly slowed down up by 0.5% point or up to 1% point. And unemployment change is not that much. And anyway, the inflation is rising like that. So in terms of persistence, so in terms of the magnitude, okay, you see that financial market respond more dramatically to climate change compared to the labor and the goods market. Okay, but in terms of timing or the persistence, okay, the maximum response of a price change occurred early period of the impact, so 2 to 3 months, okay, following the shock. Okay, but the other variables usually respond mostly around the 8 to 15 months, which means that they will usually take the earlier to make the largest response. Okay. So in brief, the asset prices respond more dramatically, and while the goods market prices reach maximum response faster, like in terms of timing. And which particular weather events have more impacts than others? And as you remember already, the temperature, okay, especially the heat, okay, hot temperature affect most, okay, the Korean economy, okay, followed by the rain and the wind and the sea level. And I'm not attempting to draw the concrete conclusion from this single country study. But well, as I mentioned before, this study is drawn from a large research project, and then in which we also studied Thailand and the Philippines. And what we find from our research project is that not all the economies respond like Korea. Yeah, for example, Philippines completely unresponsive, okay, to the climate change, which is, I don't understand the reason. For the reason which I don't understand that. So anyway, so I like to propose this talk, okay, to continue our joint research and together with you, pursuing the study of Indonesia and Malaysia in order to draw a more concrete and then the conclusion, and also step closer to the truth of about the impact of the climate change. Yeah. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Kim. Before we continue, I would like to welcome Mr. Jae Chol Kim, Country Director of Korea Exim Bank. Good morning, Mr. Kim. Now, I would like to invite Professor Suk-hyun from Graduate School of Environmental Finance, Yonsei University, to present his paper on green bonds and ESG disclosures in Korea. You have around 25 minutes to talk about your findings. The floor is yours.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for your kind arrangement, and I'm also very pleased to have joined the seminar with LPEM today as our first step. As Professor Sung Kim explained, this is just to introduce the part of our research outcomes with the AMNO, ASEAN Plus 3 macroeconomic research office based in Singapore. Actually, we just finished the page 1 research, and we talked about second page research, including other remaining ASEAN Plus 3 economies. So when we start at the second page study, we would like to invite you to the Indonesian case analysis. Yeah, today I'm just to talk about green bonds and ESG, all environmental related information disclosure in Korea. Please, next slide. So first of all, I'll talk about the value of information in the green bond market. Actually, the asymmetric information problem is a fundamental problem in financial market or capital market. But the company issue green bonds, the investor have a more severe asymmetric information problem, because the issuers, they are required to disclose more information about environmental impact of the use of proceeds. But some companies, they provide very detailed information. But some companies, they just provide a very limited information about environmental impact of use of proceeds. So let me introduce my empirical study. So as you know, the green bonds, the fixed income securities, which fund exclusively eco-friendly project with a positive environmental impact. Actually, this financial instrument combine both financial and environmental risk into one financial product, green bonds. And nowadays, as a popular instrument for financing green projects, green bonds have been gaining more attention. And it's a kind of actually, this is a general way, not that innovative way of the reducing the negative impacts and caused by human economic activities on climate change. But I'm going to explain some difference between green bonds and the general obligation bonds. So green bond issuance is associated with higher transaction costs and more complicated process like external reviews, and they have to report and regularly, and disclose more information compared to that conventional bonds. So, yeah, many people are interested in the green bonds, and also they are concerned about the greenwashing problems because of the asymmetric information in green bond market. Some studies also point out some greenwashing problems. The green bonds listed in the climate database issued between 2017 and 2019, and they Shapiro found that only 77% of green bond issuers, they just publish the information, the allocation of proceeds and the use of proceeds, and the only 59% quantified the environmental impact of the finance projects. That caused the asymmetric information problem in green bond market. And also another study point out that the Chinese green bond market, in which part of the proceeds from green bond can be used for non-green projects. Sometimes they use proceeds for another purpose. So before I introduce my empirical study, then why this problem happens? Because we have many competing and different international or regional or national standards. So the GBP Green Bond Principle published by ICMA, International Capital Market Association, and the Climate Bond Standard, which are representative to international standard, it serves as the general guideline to distinguish between green bond and other conventional bonds, but this is not mandatory. So some companies just to comply with this GBP and the CBS, but some companies, they don't want to provide the full information about their project. And another problem is the universally accepted definition or standard and enforcement mechanism, because this is the voluntary guideline, and regulation for green bond is still less. And also each country, they have their own definition of greenness. So in case of Korea, we already published the taxonomies, but it is slightly different from the European EU taxonomies and other countries. So some companies, they issued green bonds based on their national taxonomies, but maybe because of some differences, it cannot be regarded as the green bonds. And also another the challenge is the pricing mechanism of green bonds. So because of a complicated issuance process, it caused a higher transaction cost, because it required the issuers to disclose more information, and they have to get some external reviews, get some second party opinions from outside of the evaluation companies. But the green bond issuers, they enjoy kind of a greenium, the lower interest rate. Their funding cost is lower than that of the conventional bond, although they have the complicated issuance process. So I try to measure the impact of information on the green bond pricing. So I divided two groups. So one group is frequent issuers, the company which issued green bonds more than one times, more than once. Then it is defined as the frequent issuers. And the other is the infrequent issuers. They just tap the market and issue the green bond just once. And then applying the Osaka decomposition method, I tried to estimate the impact of the informations on the the pricing difference between frequent issuers and the infrequent issuers. And then I can decompose further the price difference into the explained part by the common pricing factors like the maturities and the amount and the credit ratings. They can explain the price difference between green bond and the conventional bonds. And unexplained part come from the difference of the informations between frequent issuers and infrequent issuers. So according to, based on my empirical studies, the 8 basis point yield difference for frequent issuers as a new information mechanism is comparable to existing information enhancing mechanism. So frequent issuers, they can save 8 BPS compared to the infrequent issuers. So as the immediate conclusion, if the issuers companies provide more information, and they can lower the funding cost, then I extend my previous research to the Korean case. So I utilize the ESG informations. So as I told you, the information asymmetry problem is the important theoretical and practical topics in financial and the capital market, and it poses extra risk in the green bond market related to the environmental performance and the greenwashing practices. So I collected some Korean data from Korean Exchange, and I also ESG. I also use ESG rating published by the KCDS. So we have 3 representative ESG rating companies. I pick up the KCDS ESG ratings, and I use 2 matching methods. First method is just manually matching the same issuers which have a similar bond characteristics like similar maturities and the credit ratings and other conditions. And second method is that using propensity score matchings. So first of all, I calculate the propensity score by using a logic estimation, and then I match green bond and the conventional bonds. So yeah, I'm sorry it is a little difficult to distinguish the green bond and the conventional bonds. The letter is very small, but the general comparisons without controlling other the bond characteristics, usually the interest rate of the conventional bond is lower than that of the green bonds, but after the matching, so you can confirm that the interest rate of a green bond is much lower than that of the conventional bonds. So we can find that the existence of a greenium in Korean primary bond market. So I just interpreted some empirical result. You can see this part. So when company issue green bonds, they can enjoy low funding cost. So we can confirm the existence of greenium in Korean primary bond market. And then I also utilize more information about ESG informations, ESG ratings. So if companies issue green bond, if a company with a higher ESG rating, they can issue green bond, they can lower further their funding cost. So the coefficient of this interaction term is the negative and statistically significant. And also, in case of the environmental ratings, so if companies with higher environmental ratings, they can enjoy the greeniums, so they can further lower the interest rate of their green bond interest. So As a conclusion of two empirical studies, in case of a Korean green bond market, we found the greeniums, and then if companies disclose more informations, they can mitigate asymmetric informations, and they can lower the interest rate of the green bonds. And yeah, this is the example of a structure of a green bond issuance in Korean case. So compared to the conventional bond issuance, so only major difference is external reviews. So the issuers, they must get second party opinions from external reviewers, and also they have to disclose, they have to upload the external reviews to the Korean exchange web portal. But you can access to this website, and then you can download all external reviews. But some external reviewers, they provide very detailed information, including environmental impact and use of proceeds, and very detailed information, more than 20 pages. But some reviewers, they just provide 2-page external reviews, no useful information, just the name of issuers and the general things. So according to the external reviews, still we have a very asymmetric information problems in green bond market, I can say. So lastly, I suggest some issues for research collaboration with the LPEM. So as I explained, that there are so many competing standards and guidelines for green bond standard. At the international level, we have GBP and the CBS, and also at the regional level, we have 2 regional standards: ASEAN GBS, green bond standard, and EU GBS. Well, I think only EU GBS is mandatory. The issuers must comply with the green bond standard. And also each country, they have their own guideline. Korea, Japan, China, and I think also Indonesia has its own the guideline for green bond. So as for the ESG disclosure, also so many standards, framework, and the recommendation, and also so many different letters, the rating companies. So the companies, they have a very increasing burden to disclose their environmental information or the ESG informations. So currently, so those organizations, they are talk about standardization and the harmonizations. So soon we are going to have a kind of the international standard. But yeah, mostly those are standardization and harmonization driven by the European economies. So if we harmonize or standardize those many different framework or standard that we can utilize more the Asian capitals intra-regionally, because currently each country have their own different regulations and the definitions and guidelines. But if we set up some common standard or common definitions, so we can utilize the Asian savings regionally for financing the eco-friendly project. And also we can mitigate asymmetric information problems. So I suggest that we can establish a kind of a working group for standardization or harmonization of green finance or green bonds and whatever for some financing environmental friendly project. So we can implement a comparative study on taxonomy, green bond, and transition finance, and etc. in Korea and Indonesia. And then we can expand this kind of the study network for green finance or institutions or association in Asia, based in Asia. Then we can discuss the standards, what, where, and how companies report ESG or green finance related information. And then finally, we can develop Asian standards for green finance. So our graduate school have a strong network with Green Finance Forum Korea and also the Green Finance Network Japan. So as I sent you by email on April seminar, so we invited the Japanese FS and other Asian players, and then we would like to start these discussions. Thank you for your listening. That's all for my presentations.
Thank you, Prof. Hyun. Let us now proceed to the discussion session. This session will last for about 30 minutes and will be chaired by Professor Toshiro Nishizawa. Professor Toshiro Nishizawa is a professor at the Graduate School of Public Policy of the University of Tokyo. For the introduction of the discussants will be delivered by Professor Nishizawa. Professor, the floor is yours.
It's a wonderful opportunity for me to learn. I'm not necessarily climate change or green experts, but I had some interaction with the professors, researcher from Yonsei for the past almost quite recently, actually. But I have a close tie with Professor Hyun-suk, and I'm learning especially green bond issues. So I think it's this is a wonderful opportunity for both sides to learn from each other. And well, I'd like to mention a few things. This morning, I had a chance to talk to Febrio, head of Fiscal Policy Agency. And I learned that Indonesia takes a lead, very strong lead in climate change issues, addressing climate change issues. And he mentioned the Indonesia Green Taxonomy published last year, right? About a year ago. So that is an indication of Indonesia's leadership in this field. Having said that, on particular topics of today's presentation, well, the first was Kim's research, the impact of this climate change, supply shocks. I think this might have an implication for Indonesia, especially sea levels. Right? So there might be a chance to do some joint research on that field. And second one is green bonds. This is my favorite topic, greenwashing, how to prevent greenwashing. And there's a puzzle. I wonder why there's greenium, sizable excess demand. Is this just a bubble, green bubble? And or the green is a reward to the efforts, extra work done by issuers. I don't know what is the reason. And I know that Indonesia, some Ministry of Finance or SME, PTSMI, or some other company issue green bonds. So I think there's the common interest to doing some research on green bonds as well. So this is my initial, my thought on the topics. But from now on, I would like both sides to ask questions about your common interests. Maybe there might be a need to for Indonesian side to ask question on Yonsei's presentation. So any question from your side?
Okay, maybe not a questions. I would like to add some assumptions before we are creating a modeling in this study. First thing first, Indonesia is different to Korea because we are in the level of the just enter the upper middle level, and we are aiming for higher economic growth accelerated with the manufacturing sector, which is totally different to a country that depends on service sectors, because this will create both energy emissions from the energy and also emissions from the plant on the manufacturer or the factory. So let me start with the first that we can put, because before we construct the model, we need to have a proper assumptions or for the modeling. Let me start with the first slide. Yeah, this is the climate change, and then I would like to remind you, this is a long-run perspective, a long-run vision. Energy transition is a long-run issues, and you know that Indonesia is also have another long-run issues that are very important to be connected, which is economic transformations, and we are in the path of downstreaming, and then that will be affect climate scenario. And the important thing is the mitigation scenario that we have to put in our modeling, finding the equilibrium from zero sum to win-win solutions, because every time if you do shock and then there is a overshoot in our economy, then we have to consider the mitigations as soon as possible. Okay, next slide, please. So you see that South Korea and Indonesia has a different path. I take the data from 1967, sorry, to 2021. You can see that we never experienced higher economic growth like above 10% with the stable inflation rate, while South Korea in 1980s, 1990s experienced this with manufacturing's massive development. And also you can see that it's already, transformed the economy of the South Korea with manufacturing as a backbone to be a high income level and avoid the middle income trap, while Indonesia never experienced that before. And we never experienced economic growth above 10%. Once we get that, inflation rate will be soaring very high. And you can see that also experience from the Japan, 1960s, 1970s. So we are aiming for the economic transformations. Next slide, please. You see that the openness is a game changer for Indonesia economy from those perspective, from open unemployment, growth, inflation rate. I see from the Professor Seong presentations that try to look at the impact of the environment damage to the growth, to the open unemployment we know as Okun's law, and then to open unemployment to inflation rates we know as the Phillips curve, and then from inflation rate to growth we understand it as output gap, and also to real exchange rate, and also to interest rate. And I find that this is a very interesting modeling. But in Indonesia, before we are doing that, we need to understand another factors. And again, I emphasize economic transformations and downstreaming scenario. Next slide, please. So if you see that Indonesia, this is the official document from our government side, that Indonesia attempt to achieve in 2045, 23,000.2 US dollars per capita. From now is what 4,000, so 6 times higher. And this needs a lot of scenario, and then that will create a shock in the Indonesia economy. And as you maybe follow the issue of downstreaming, there are also an issue on how we accelerate our economic growth with the help of the foreign investors, for sure. So it's not only talking about how Indonesia transforms its economy, but also how Indonesia cooperate with foreign countries to accelerate Indonesia development over manufacturing. And that will be the game changer for the climate change, because it will create higher emissions than current scenario. And also not only that, how about the technology that we use and energy sources that we use? Are we going to use the brown energy or still remain on that in addition to or on behalf of we are going to accelerate our economic growth with the manufacturing sector, or we move to renewable energy, which is very expensive? So if you put the renewable energy at the very, very expensive one, and then we also limit emissions through, let's say, emissions trading system, we have to limit that, and then it will influence the economic growth. While in your model, we found that, of course, in other model also we follow that will decrease emissions. I mean, will increase the economic growth once we implement climate change friendly, right? But the other side of the coin, we see that will put the barriers to the economic growth for the short run. So how to mitigate this or find the fine-tuning equilibrium between these two pros and cons to our modeling, especially from Indonesia perspective. Maybe we can learn from this Korea in 1980s and 1990s. How do you manage this issue, accelerate the economic growth, but at the same time also protecting the environments? Next slide, please. Yes, this is the scenario that we found from the Bappenas, National Planning Agency Indonesia. So as also you show us that, of course, if we put environment friendly scenario, that will be good for our economic growth, will be good for open unemployment, will be good for inflation rate, will be good for output gap, and will be good for the stability of the exchange rate and interest rate at the end. But we need to be more concise, and we need more accurate to estimate Indonesia scenario, because as I mentioned, we are very enthusiastic and very keen to have a downstreaming issues. Everything has to be downstream, and then export ban for the raw materials. So that will be a different story. I believe, of course, if we have a climate change scenario putting in our policy, that will be good for our economic growth. But how about for the short run, when we accelerated the manufacturing sector's emissions? Totally different to the country that have a service sector as a backbone of economic growth, because service sector have emissions and energy usage lower than manufacturing sector. And next slide, please. So again, we can see from two sides. Once from the energy sources, renewable energy is very expensive. How about the transmissions or transformation that we need? And how about the manufacturing activities that also contribute to emissions in the downstream, about 5% to the pollution, and then renewable energy from the upstream. So both the climate change we can see from the upstream to downstream. Next slide, please. I think this is the last slide. This is just want to show you one of our study to find that South Korea is very enthusiastic to Indonesia electric vehicle, battery electric vehicle. That will reduce the emissions gas from the car, of course, zero emissions. And then the energy sources, that will be 2 points, either using fossil fuel for the energy generator, or coal. That's another story. But what we found is here, South Korea and in addition to small, is also blurred. But again, I just let me mention that what we found in South Korea and Indonesia is a very will create a benefit, mutual benefit, if they have a focus on primary cell, battery electric vehicles, and nickel. That's what we found within South Korea and Indonesia. And I think we can use this as a framework to found the appropriate modeling using as examples or for instance, this sector between South Korea and Indonesia to achieve environment friendly, net zero emissions, but at the same time also economic transformation downstreaming from nickel ores to nickel mates, nickel bars, other of nickels, and also lithium battery at the end with using hydrometallurgic technology. Next slide, please. So yeah, of course, we have to talk about the policy at the end of the day. What policy? Energy, emissions trading system, or carbon tax, or hybrid? And then Indonesia is still under considering these two between the ETS or carbon tax or hybrid. And of course, the ideal model is hybrid. Then let's discuss about this further on after we have a good model with this assumption that I mentioned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pak Kiki. Do you give Korean side to ask questions? Do you have any thoughts on about Kiki's points?
For your comment and the suggestion, and I'm quite inspired by when I listening your comment, and some of your comments, those we are already undertake or at the moment considering in our analysis. So as you mentioned, the difference between the countries must require some different modeling strategies. So for example, the difference in the income group and the sectoral and composition and industry structure and so on. So the one possible way to overcome the limitation of our current analysis is that if we have enough, a large number of countries and enough of quality data, then we may pursue some kind of the panel analysis, panel study, so by which we can identify the common causes, by controlling the development stages and the difference in the openness and so on. So that is one possible strategies. And also I'll have to think about that. My modeling, the methodology is basically based on the Shonen analysis. Although the climate change is a long-lasting changing phenomenon, and so the future will be quite different from the current result, depending on how much we prepared, including the what kind of the energy mix we adopt, and how we implement the carbon pricing system, including ETS and so on. So I'll keep going upon your comments and upon my current thoughts, and and I hope we share sooner or later. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Dr. Kiki, thank you for your suggestion for research collaboration. And in addition to research collaboration, as for the economic cooperation between Indonesia and Korea, so that's why I invite Mr. Kim from the Indonesia Residence Office from the Korea Exim Bank. So I think he will add more comment on your suggestion.
It's my turn now, Professor. So I might be different with Pak Kiki's comments, so I will probably more focus on the presentations from Professor Kim and Professor Hyun. So it's a little bit more academic, Pak Kiki, if it's not mine. So I'm going to try to give some comments based on the slides that has shared with us. So I guess it is still working on progress, and then probably my comments are not relevant, but this is the perspective from the reader that has just read the slides. So next slide, please, Dina. So what I'm going to try to do here is like to give some perspective from what I've learned from this paper. And I guess we are really, it is agreed from all of us here that climate change is important, and it is a timely issue because it affects everything. As Professor Kim has mentioned earlier, it affects the agriculture, even to the economy. So it affects every aspects in our economy. However, there is still limited evidence, and Pak Kiki has also mentioned about the modeling. So we still need more studies, projects or research on what are the impact of this climate change on macro perspective, especially in Asian +3 region. So what Professor Kim has done in his paper is he's trying to investigate the impact of various type of climate change, rain, sea level, and so on and so forth, and how does it affect the economy, and some specific robustness exercises using data from Korea. So what he finds in his paper is indeed it affects the economy, even though I think it's quite quite straightforward because maybe you need some more exercise to really estimate the impact. It affects several outcomes in the economy, and also he suggested that there are some heterogeneity in terms of the type of the climate itself. So we may also have to think about what will be the policy response due to some specific weather condition. So I think it is really interesting paper, and I really enjoy reading the slides, not the paper, but I think as we have already agreed today that this is a really timely topic. So I think future collaboration between every audience in this room will be very important. And also I think at LPM, we also have our own research group, which is led by Ibu Halimato Sadia. Unfortunately, she will be away, so she's going to Kobe today or tomorrow, so she couldn't attend this meeting. Next slide, please, Dina. So I think I will have three major comments for each paper. First is about the motivation from the paper itself. I know this is the data from Korea, but when we are trying to sell this paper to the general audience, we need to sell it more in a good way. I guess first is whether, because we have the data that are really extensive, is it really important to study this topic? Or we also need to talk about whether South Korea has got hit due to some climate events, because it has been happening all over the world, but why should Korea will have a different impact compared to, for example, Indonesia? That will be my first comment. And also because Professor Kim has used a lot of data and also different type of climate indicators, so that probably need to be explained better in the paper, I guess. The second one is probably needs to be elaborated more in the paper is maybe some short story about the climate change trend in South Korea. So how does it affect the economy? How does it correlate it with some indicators or economic outcomes? Maybe it can give some flavor for us who are not from South Korea. What are the actual impact of this condition? So that's from the motivation. The second one is about the, next slide, Dina. The second one is about the data. So I get your point from your presentation, how you construct this data, the weather, and so on and so forth. But by just reading the slides, it's quite difficult to really understand what are actually the shock in the paper. So the shock from the climate and so on and so forth. Limited information about the data and other information. So I think maybe in the paper you have done several things to explain the data, but that will be very important to make the audience aware about the data that are being used in this paper. The second one is the model. So I know this is a short run impact, right? So probably need to explain further about why we think that the use of FAR is good enough to explain the impact of the climate change on the economy. What are the issues about using this method? And finally, is about what is exactly climate shocks in the FAR model. So maybe it needs to also be elaborated further in the paper. Also, but you've mentioned in your slide the difference between climate versus weather, how we can define this is a climate issue, not the weather issue, and so on and so forth. And the last comment for Professor Kim paper is, next slide, Dina. So about the results, I think you've pointed out during the presentation, in the first 3 months or in the short period, it has a positive effects on the output. So I don't really understand how it could affect positively on the output, because you already use this negative sign restriction, right? So how it can affect positively on the output, why? But I also think the story about the different type of the weather is also interesting. So how you can sell it more properly, it will be a really great story, because probably it doesn't really affect in the context of South Korea, but here in Indonesia, we have several type of climate events that probably will also affect the outcome. So this will be interesting to elaborate it more. How does it affect differently towards the outcome? And some analysis about why it persists longer than the other, why, for example, drought probably will have a persistent effect compared to other type of climate. That will be great, because maybe other governments have their own priority, and maybe another policy anticipation for future potential events. And last but not least, probably policy implication, because again, you have several type of weather shocks. The policy response will be different, right? So maybe that will be interesting to discuss further. That's my comment for Professor Kim's paper. And the second one is about the green bonds and ESG disclosure. So I guess here in Indonesia, the topic about ESG and also green bonds have been widely discussed, but there's still limited evidence on whether it is benefit on. Okay. Professor, yeah. Another event, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
That's okay. Thank you, Pak Jeka.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So some summary about the second paper. It provides some, I guess this is several papers, right, Professor Hyun? Not just one paper about green bonds and ESG, but Professor Hyun has explained a lot of things related to green bonds and ESG in South Korea. And he tries to investigate the role of green bonds issue in Korea and its correlation with the ESG rating. So it finds that green bonds can be issued at lower yields. So maybe it's also interesting for Ministry of Finance or also private companies to issue bonds with a lower yield, because that it will affect the cost of fund, right, for issuing this bond. And indeed, there is some greenium, which especially for those who have received the ESG rating. And again, I think this is also interesting. I'm not an environmental economist, so this is something new for me, but I guess this is things that need to be discussed further in the future. So similar to what my comment for Professor Kim's, I also have like 3 major comments that probably needs to be taken into consideration. So next slide, please, Dina. First is again the background. I think study about ESG and green bonds, even though it has been increasing in the past 5 or 10 years, but it still remain understudied. So we need to also share about this paper that we need more studies about this topic, because there still remain limited evidence on this. Again, the data, because I know that you are combining several data sets, whether it is also important to sell about this data, because combining several data sets will give a good impression that you've done a lot of things to do for a paper. And how by using this data will improve our understanding about green and ESG, not only in the context of Korea, but also worldwide, because probably it will be different across different countries. It should be also explained in the study. And finally, how will this study fit with the existing literature? Because I guess it's still limited, but maybe we can also explain what are the previous studies that has done about this particular topic. The next major comment is about, next slide, please, Dina. So identification strategy. I don't really get about the data, whether it is yearly data or monthly data, but I guess it is yearly data because your N is around 200 something. And how many bonds or firms or bonds issued by firms. Maybe my major comment is about the endogeneity issue, because I guess firms issuing a bond will be endogenous due to some other factors which is unobservable. So I don't know whether using matching method will isolate this issue, because when you're using matching method, it's basically just comparing some observable factors, but we don't really control for the unobservable. So maybe some discussion about this identification strategy will be important. Fixed effects, whether it is at the bond level or at the industry level or at the company level, and what kind of variation that you want to control with this fixed effect, maybe you can also discuss it in the paper. And last comment will be, next slide, the magnitude. So whether it is sizable, your findings, maybe it's also great to compare it with other studies that are also trying to estimate this similar topic. So how big is the size of this result, whether it is sensible or not, some mechanism, because maybe we also need to know what are the potential transmissions between your result, whether by issuing green bonds with this outcome. So maybe it will also help to give us a better understanding why it affects the outcome variable. Maybe this is my own preference. Can we do it like a subsample analysis? So whether different type of firms, type industry size or sectors, whether it also give us a same story or not. So because that will be also leads to the policy implications, right? So if the different sectors issue different bonds, whether it also have a similar story or not, then that will be also interesting to discuss further. So I guess that's my major comments for these two papers. Again, I've learned a lot by reading the slides and also by listening to your presentations. But I think for all of us here, green economy is really an interesting issue. Even for myself, currently I'm writing for the BIS survey for recent development about the energy transition. So I think many of us need to learn more about this topic because it's going to be the issue in the next 5 years, I guess. But as I've mentioned earlier, there are still limited studies on this particular topic, not only in Indonesia, but all across the world. Maybe because of the data, maybe in Korea, the data is quite good, but here in Indonesia, we don't really have the information even at the firm level. So that will be another potential issue that we can also discuss further. But I enjoy reading the paper or the slides and looking forward to reading the complete version of the draft. So maybe that's my comments for the paper and looking forward to the published version of the paper in the future. So thanks, Professor Kim, Professor Hyun, for your great presentations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jahan. So we are running out of time, but it's a very good start of the research collaboration first step. So please respond to these very specific questions, Professor Kim and Hyun.
Your comment. I feel like as if I received review report from a prestigious journal. Yeah. So yeah, I'll continue to develop. Yeah, based on your things. And just mention the one of your many specific comments or questions. The why the VAR? Well, actually, as a part of robustness check, I use that some unrestricted method like a local projection, and then I found that the result is quite similar. But here I didn't present. But apart from that, I have to incorporate in terms of when I write up the paper. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah,
thank you very much for your fruitful comments. Actually, under the current system, the green bond issuers are required to disclose their information, including use of proceeds and the environmental impact. But as I explained, some companies, they sincerely disclose all information, but some companies, they just disclose very limited information about their projects. So without fully disclosing important informations, investors and stakeholders, they cannot distinguish real green bond and seemingly all quasi green bonds. That's why I show you some graph. The interest in green bond is rapidly increasing. On the other hand, the concern on the greenwashing is also rapidly increasing. So I just to stress the importance of information disclosures in green bond market. And if the green bond issuers, they provide more information, they can lower their funding cost. That's the major point. And thanks again for your great comment.
Okay.
Hey, thank you, moderator. It seems I'm the only one who's in the field, not from academia, so it's very cautious to comment on the research papers. I'd like to echo, though, that the argument that the Indonesian government policy to promote the downstream manufacturing sector definitely require the environmental mitigation measures. I have one example. battery electric vehicle ecosystem establishment policy, and also the ban on the export of raw materials such as nickel, copper, bauxite, and then build the refinery here in Indonesia will issue many CO2, and also that kind of manufacturing facility will require much energy sources. And Indonesian government, they would like to increase the energy source from renewable energy instead of the coal or oil and gas. And the major two types of energy in Indonesia in terms of renewable energy is hydro and geothermal energy generation. And the paradoxical side of those two types of renewable energy, they require deforestation. So the hydro energy site is mostly in North Sumatra, Sulawesi, the forest area. So Indonesian government, they have a conservation forest policy. So building many hydropower plants, dams is somewhat contradictory to their environmental conservation policy. And also the geothermal plant, they are mostly located in the wood, the forest area. So how to mitigate this kind of environment bad impact to increase the renewable energy is also paradox that the Indonesian government needs to harmonize. This is not an easy task, I think. So probably Korean government and many development partner countries needs to collaborate with the Indonesian government. Also, as a development financier, I have a very naive logic of thinking. So I have a question about the green bond, the competitiveness of green bond compared to the conventional bond. As a financier, I think the interest rate of the bond issuance must be based on the creditworthiness of the issuer. And if there's a more burden, then that will increase the transaction costs, such as ESG disclosure. Then that will increase the cost of funding. So I'm wondering what types of mechanism we can think of to make the green bond more competitive than the conventional bond. So that's my simple comment. Listening to very touching and also very intriguing the research presentation. And on this occasion, let us introduce the Korean government development policy and also the underlying discussion between Korean government and Indonesian government to set up an international platform to achieve the net zero commission. Korean government has a development cooperation mechanism, which is we call the EDCF funding, the Economic Development and Cooperation Fund, such as JICA in Japan, OECF, they used to be called OECF. And this EDCF funding, this is a very highly concessional loan to assist the development project and development partner countries. We have three major focus areas when we consider funding this ODA loan. They are green, digital, and healthcare. So I think the green sector is best suited for the climate change mitigation and adaptation effort. So we focus on the renewable energy, and also we focus on the smart transportation projects such as MRT and LRT or BRT in Indonesia metropolitan cities. So throughout this kind of development funding effort, we hope we can collaborate with Indonesia to achieve the net zero effort. And also, let me briefly introduce the current discussion between two governments. Last year, July, the Indonesian government delegation visited Korean capital city, Sejong City. and Indonesian government proposed to set up international platform to achieve net zero here in Indonesia. And they agreed to call it GTI, Green Transition Initiative. And last year, November, on the occasion of the G20 summit in Bali, the Korean president and Indonesian president made a declaration to launch this effort officially. So the GTI, the Green Transition Initiative, the main mission is to identify the green large landmark infrastructure project here in Indonesia. And they plan to launch this GTI this year on the occasion of the G20 in September in New Delhi, and also COP28 in November in Dubai. So in September, they plan to have a high-level meeting among ministerial ministers. And also on November, they plan to have first board of directors meeting. But this GTI initiative is at the outset. So the Korean government, the Ministry of Environment, designated K-Water to set up the working level discussion with the Indonesian government. So hopefully this effort will produce successful outcome for Indonesia to achieve the net zero emission target in the year of 2045. Thank you.
That's all right. Thank you, Professor Toshiro Nishizawa, speakers and discussant. That marks the end of today's seminar. We would like to thank the speakers, discussant, and chair for delivering such enlightening insights on green finance. We convey our deepest gratitude to all of you participants for your participation. Thank you very much and have a good day.